look, in many ways, the sort of spirituality that I'm suggesting is very similar to indigenous earth-based spirituality. Yeah. In indigenous spirituality, the divine is not somewhere else; it is here. Yeah, and there is, and you cannot come close to the divine without acting in a, let's say, in a sacred way. Yeah. So as an indigenous person, you are almost automatically, let's just say a sacred warrior. Yeah. With the aim to restore balance in the world in a similar way in which, like a wolf as a top predator would restore balance in a particular biotope. Yeah. And the way how life plays out, that is the divine. There is no dichotomy between the two. You don't need to go to heaven or into nirvana to seek the divine there. The divine is here right now, yeah, and the way how you act in this world, that matters, yeah, because there is nothing but God. That's probably the important message that I want to give, yeah, that there is nothing but God. Yeah. So everything that you see in front of you, this computer screen, all matter. There is no atom that is not God. The entire material universe is the crystallized body of God. So when you step on the floor, you're stepping on God. When you're breathing air, you're breathing the divine. Yeah. In every other being, you see the divine looking out of the eyes of that being at you. Yeah. So in some ways, and that's why it's so hard to understand Alfred North Whitehead, is because he had to, in order to explain process, that the divine is a process, he had to redefine all words that he's using, because it's very strange the way how we have this idea of spirituality today. It's really, really strange. If you were an extraterrestrial and you would come to Earth and you would think, what are they thinking? There is two options, as you said. One is that there's only matter and there's there's not the divine. And the other option is that the divine is a guy that is living somewhere up there, or it's emptiness, nothingness that is nowhere. This is just so bizarre, because the two are the same. Yeah, that means matter is the crystallized strata of pure consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's not always easy to recognize that you're stepping on the floor and you're stepping on the divine, and so on a practical level, going back to more practical ideas and your ideas of formal practice. What recommendations have you got for people to come into a different kind of relationship with themselves as a part of the divine? You talk a lot about self-love in your work, right? And what that means. And you also talk about as indigenous practices such as the walkabouts, the Aboriginal idea of walkabout, which is a dynamic interaction with the earth, and and it's an active process of listening and watching and relation with the external world, which is not so much found in necessarily in someone practicing modern postural yoga, asana-based practice in an enclosed room on their own.
But look, if you look at the Taittiriya Upanishad, so you have those 5 layers, of which you got the body. So we do asana for that, and then we do pranayama for the pranic strata, and we do yogic meditation for the mental strata, and then we have this Anandamaya kosha, this objectless samadhi, that is samadhi on pure consciousness, which is the last layer. But what is that? The Vijnanamaya kosha, yeah? And when you look into the Gita, Krishna, I think he mentions the term Vijnana 6 times, yeah? That Vijnana is God realization, yeah? And when he says God realization, what he means with that is the immanent aspect of the divine, because he wants to get Arjuna to not go into a cave and on a mountaintop and to drop out of life. No, he said, you stay here in society and you do your duty. Yeah. But don't do it for yourself, but you do it for me. Yeah. So this is 100% what I'm saying. Yeah. The thing only is, we came to think of God as something that is somewhere else, which is not true, because this material universe is the crystallized body of God. So Vijnana means to recognize the material world as the crystallized body of God, and then to find out, what does the divine want me to do in this world? Yeah. And then hopefully we come to some insights that the divine wants to do wants to do us to do something constructive, something that adds to the life of other life forms, makes their life better. Which again brings me to the point, if my practice is mere asceticism, mere sitting in a cave meditating on the formless absolute, or let me sit in a penthouse meditating on the formless absolute, what do I give to others? Nothing. Yeah. What Vijnanamaya kosha does, what it means is to feel what your nature gifts are, and then to use them to give to other beings. Yeah. And then you come into this amazing state where you realize ultimately what matters is for me to give my life from a position of giving, that is, making a contribution to the life of others. In what way? That is for you to find out. Yeah, but ultimately, this is what it is. Spirituality is not sitting alone by yourself. I mean, look, I'm practicing about 4.5 hours a day, so I do a fair amount of sitting, and doing my asana practice, etc. So I do that too. But then, hopefully, after that time, I've come to a conclusion. Okay, this is what I want to give to the world. Yeah, in my case, I'm spending several hours a day reading, teaching online, of course, and now slowly starting traveling, meeting my students in person, but also synthesizing what I read in sacred scripture and science. I'm reading science as well, to synthesize that into a new worldview in which spirituality and science are one thing. Yeah. And using that to empower us to have an informed and healing impact on the world, where we can actually give. Yeah. And then you realize, well, I don't actually need to take so much for myself. Yeah. It doesn't really matter whether I have 1 million or 2, and how many cars do I need, and how fat does my house have to be. And where you realize what really makes me happy is actually to give to others. Yeah. To make a contribution. And I think this is also, when you finally breathe your last breath, I think what stays is what you have given to others, not what you have taken or what you have received, but what stays, what matters in that moment is what you have actually given to others. That enables you to die with a feeling of fulfillment and gratitude.
I think I totally agree. But I think it's definitely a reassessment of a practice which was for personal liberation, and slightly more perhaps along, to use another term, slightly along more Buddhist lines, that one has an obligation for compassion and for service and for qualities in the world, for using a practice out for something out there, and to give and to make a contribution. Or whereas what we see a lot in the scriptures is a kind of more up and out mentality of you use your practice simply to escape, simply to get yourself out of the shit you find yourself in, right? Rather than, from what I understand of what you're saying, is that we have this obligation after having practiced to use that practice for the world, right? To make a contribution in the world for the better.
Absolutely, because the thing is, so I spent a real lot of time in my life doing practices, and when I sort of came out of that and managed to stay in expanded consciousness, I suddenly realized how much pain and how much need there is in the world. Yeah. So ironically, I do live on a mountaintop, so I withdrew on a mountaintop. And so then I was sitting on that mountaintop in Samadhi, and I realized I'm needed in the world, like I need to go out and give. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a sad state of affairs when you would have practiced for decades mystical techniques, and then you sort of sit gloating there in your shabby own little samadhi while the whole world is going bonkers. I mean, honestly, I think the world is pretty crazy. If you read the news and you notice what's going on, the amount of suffering. So I think it's really important that people who do have a strong spiritual practice and who do have strong spiritual insights, that they go out in the world and leave their mark and teach and give other people and heal. We need those people. We can't afford that they go off and disappear into some caves and then into nirvana. I can guarantee you, if we do that, humanity will go down the gargler. If you look at the myth of Lord Shiva, yeah, this is all what happened to Lord Shiva, where karma came and shot him with the feathered arrow, and then he fell in love with Parvati. It was all about getting the yogi, getting the mystic back into society. Yeah, I'm referring to the death of Sati. Yeah, and then the story of mystic.
We find the same.
The mystic needs to come back into society, because it's through mystical states that there is innovation. Yeah. So when the mystic leaves and when they all go into their caves and meditate themselves into nirvana and pop off, society will become encrusted and there will be no more innovation, no more novelty.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to say we find the same with Jesus, right? When he's taken by the devil, by Satan, and he's taken up, I think, Mount Sinai, and he's helped, and he's kind of taken up high, and he said, "You can have, look at all this, you can have whatever you want, right? I can grant you whatever you want, right? And he comes back down after the time in the desert, right? And after being tempted by Satan in that last part, and he comes back down and does that work, and sacrifices himself for the same kind of myth is found. I mean, what I wanted to say finally is, okay, we've talked about devotion, we've talked about giving oneself towards for the sake of others. You mentioned self-love in your book, and I mentioned it earlier in the question slightly, and we didn't fully expand on that. I mean, would you just like to say what that means outside pampering yourself in a spa? What a deeper self-love in terms of your own practice might look like. Yeah.
Yes. So okay. I think that all of this pampering, like when these slogans, show that you love yourself by giving you this and this and this.
Me time.
Yeah, that's right. But what I found is that when you sit in complete self-love and self-acceptance, you actually realize that you need absolutely nothing. Yeah. And to sit in self-love is actually a profound spiritual state. Yeah. And it cannot be experienced in a state in which there is ego. Yeah. I actually believe that it is lack of self-love that gets us to act competitive and egoistically, and gets us to say, I want to have more for myself because I don't love myself. Yeah. So it's the other way around. It's not, you can't prove yourself that you love yourself by giving yourself diamonds, gold, real estate, whatever. No. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
In fact, when you allow, it's a heart state. Yeah. When you allow yourself to go into the heart and to actually feel that the divine experiences nothing but total love for you, yeah, in that moment you can accept that, because the question is, if the divine can love me in total perfection, why cannot I? Yeah, and of course the answer is because I experienced some negative things in the past that made me question my self-worth and my value. Yeah, and the healing for that is to actually experience that the divine accepts and loves you with total perfection, without holding back, because the divine can see you in your perfection, because you're a child of the divine, yeah, and you carry God in your heart, as Krishna says in the Gita, I'm the self in the heart of all beings. When you can see yourself in that, yeah, this healing takes place, where then you don't need to, I need to snatch this and this and this away from other beings to become whole, because you realize you're whole already. Yeah. And then when you have accepted that state within you, hopefully then you can go out into the world and become an agent for healing other beings as well.
Yeah. Is that what you mean by the divine child? When you talk about the divine child, because you say that there's transcendence, you've got the immanent, and you've got the third manifestation of God consciousness is the divine child.
Yeah, so, we are all children of the divine, but you can also say that collectively we are all life forms, not just human beings, microbes as well. Yeah, all of the animals, all of the plants. Yeah. Life actually is the divine son or the child of the divine, yeah, collectively. Right. And so that's where a completely new, out of that comes a completely new ecology. So it's not just human beings, it's not just males, yeah, but it's life that is the child of the divine, yeah. And so then you suddenly realize, I need to extend this love also to animals, to trees, to microbes, etc. And I need to be an agent in the world that allows them to coexist with us too. They need to have their space too.
Exactly. As you mentioned, the speciesism is unfortunately rampant, and we're not doing a very good job of our perceived preeminence here. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Gregor.
Thanks for having me. That was great, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Namaste.